All right, let's just dive right into this explainer and unpack the psychological mystery of the absolute most intense color in the visible spectrum. We are surrounded by yellow every single day, from the blinding sun in the sky to the carefully engineered branding on the apps you tap on your phone. It's literally everywhere. But rarely do we actually stop to consider what this incredibly high-frequency hue is physically doing to our brains. So we're going to explore the extreme duality of yellow, looking at how it walks this razor-thin wire between sparking genuine optimism and triggering a complete sensory overload. Take a second and ask yourselves, when you see a massive wash of this color, does it spark joy and sunshine? Or does it quietly, almost invisibly, put your nervous system on high alert? Imagine walking into a room where the walls, the ceiling, the floor, the whole shebang are painted an intense, vibrating neon yellow. Just linger in that imaginary room for a second. Some people are going to feel an immediate, almost euphoric rush of creative energy. But others, they'll feel this inexplicable, crawling urge to leave immediately. And this isn't just a matter of having a favorite aesthetic. You are experiencing a profound, hardwired biological response. We're basically navigating what psychologists call the yellow paradox. On one side of the ledger, you've got a color universally associated with warmth, cheerfulness, and honestly, a literal serotonin release in the brain. It promotes mental clarity and joy. But on the exact opposite side of that spectrum, it represents massive sensory overload. It's the color of caution, anxiety, cowardice, and deceit. It actively triggers our deeply ingrained hazard detection software. So how can a single wavelength of light mean two completely opposite, irreconcilable things? Well, the answer lies in how our bodies actually process visual info. Let's look at part one, the neuroscience. Basically, your brain on yellow. To really understand the psychology here, we have to look at the physical hardwiring of our bodies. Yellow doesn't just gently enter your field of vision, it practically kicks the front door down. It acts as a massive, unavoidable wake-up call to the nervous system. When that light hits your retina, it aggressively stimulates the analytical left hemisphere of your brain. Physiologically, it even speeds up your metabolism and builds emotional energy. Evolutionarily speaking, our brains prioritize this frequency because it demands attention. It stands out starkly against the natural blues and greens of our ancestral environments. It promotes high levels of thought and boosts memory recall. Actually, there's a very specific biological reason we instinctively reach for yellow highlighters when we study, right? It literally forces the brain to lock in and pay attention. There's this quote: "Yellow is the most fatiguing of all colors to the eye because it reflects so much light." And that pretty much hits the nail on the head. It brilliantly illustrates the physical cost of that constant stimulation. Yellow physically reflects a massive volume of light back at us. Think about the sensation of reading bright yellow text on a stark white background. It is actually genuinely painful. The sheer amount of light bouncing off a yellow surface means that prolonged exposure quickly fatigues the human eye. And, when your eyes are strained, your mind follows closely behind, leading to a profound sense of cognitive exhaustion. Now, the knife edge between ancient hazard detection software and brilliant creativity is incredibly sharp here. For hyper-vigilant nervous systems, this intense brightness crosses the line from cheerful right into sheer sensory overload. If you're already stressed, or sleep-deprived, or just overwhelmed, that massive visual wake-up call is interpreted by your brain's primal threat detection center as a warning. The creativity instantly sours into anxiety. Which brings us to part two, the dark side, black bile and impurity. Because our ancestors experienced this intense visual fatigue, they began attaching deep, heavily symbolic meanings to yellow, especially when it lost its bright luster and blended with murky, darker tones. To fully grasp this, we've got to look at humorism. This was the ancient medical theory going way back to Hippocrates, linking human temperament and physical health to four specific bodily fluids. The system dictated that a perfectly healthy body maintained a delicate balance of these fluids. Illness, whether a physical sickness or a mental breakdown, was blamed entirely on an imbalance, specifically an excess of the dreaded yellow and black biles. Just imagine the psychological impact of truly believing your very personality and health were dictated by the color of the fluids sloshing around inside you. According to some really fascinating cultural studies out of Hungary, an excess of yellow bile was thought to make a person literally venomous and fiercely envious. This firmly and permanently associated the hue with sickness, dirt, and impurity. In ancient human perception, a dark, murky yellow became the universal color of bodily secretions, illness, and physical decay. In fact, in Hungarian linguistics, the root word sár carried multiple overlapping meanings. It meant mud, it meant yellow, and it was even used to describe feces. If it was yellow and murky, it was considered dangerous to human health and deeply, deeply unclean. And this creates a stunning historical dichotomy when we look at how ancient cultures paired colors together. Yellow historically symbolized barren, dry, lifeless dirt. We often think of black as the ultimate negative, frightening color today, but our ancestors saw black as something else entirely. Black was fertile, life-giving soil. Black earth was the womb of nature. It yielded crops, held moisture, and sustained the entire community. Yellow soil, on the other hand, was the dry, sandy, desolate wasteland where nothing could survive. It's a profound paradox that completely flips our modern understanding of black equals bad on its head. Moving on to part 3, the blurred line: yellow, green, and health. So if yellow was historically the color of sickness and barren dirt, green was the ultimate symbol of nature, vitality, and life. But in the ancient mind, the boundary between these two colors was incredibly fluid. Take the practices of Hungarian folk medicine, for example. Practitioners believed that a patient suffering from jaundice, which, is characterized by a sickly yellow tint, actually contracted the illness from the yellowish-green hue of a decaying corpse. And the cure? It required a literal, magical battle of colors. To heal the patient, the toxic yellow sickness had to be forcefully returned to the living green of nature. People would undergo rituals like urinating on stinging nettles, or attempting to magically transfer their yellow illness into the trunk of a living green tree. The vital green was used as a weapon to slay the toxic yellow. Now, what's really wild to see here is how many distinct ancient cultures, from ancient Greek to Semitic languages, use the exact same root word to describe both yellow and green. They didn't even possess separate vocabulary for them. Because these two colors sit right next to each other on the physical spectrum of visible light, our ancestors perceived them not as distinct categories, but as a single continuous wash of color. The line between sickness and vitality was just a slight shift in shade. Looking directly at the historical linguistic records, we see this beautifully confirmed. The Indo-Germanic root gel birthed the modern words for both colors. And the psychological overlap between the two is undeniable, even today. Actually, think about our common idioms. In English, we say someone is green with envy. But if you translate that concept into Hungarian or Romanian, the phrase becomes yellow with envy. The underlying human emotion is exactly the same, but the linguistic expression just dances seamlessly across that blurred yellow-green line. Biologically speaking, balancing intense, fatiguing yellow spaces with cooling green is a proven, modern strategy used heavily in architectural design today. Take modern classrooms, for instance. If yellow acts as a massive wake-up call that violently strains the eye and commands attention, injecting green into that space provides the human nervous system with a necessary restorative break. The green physically calms the optic nerve, reducing that fatiguing glare. So this means that an ancient linguistic and cultural pairing actually maps perfectly onto cutting-edge educational and psychological design strategies to prevent mental burnout. How cool is that? Okay, part 4, demanding a reaction, the power of extreme visibility. We no longer just fear the exhausting nature of yellow. The modern world has actively weaponized its extreme visibility to control human behavior. When we analyze relative luminosity data, the yellow-green region of the spectrum is mathematically the most readily visible to the human eye, period. This makes it the absolute best, most cautious choice for high-stakes environments. When an ambulance or a fire truck needs to cut through a chaotic, visually overwhelming field of heavy traffic, rain or fog, plain white simply isn't strong enough. A bright, luminous yellow-green contrasts violently against almost every natural background on Earth, slicing through the visual clutter and demanding our immediate attention. And beyond emergency services, corporate branding completely relies on this physiological response. Fast food chains famously pair vibrant yellow with red to achieve a very specific result. They use yellow to grab your eye from the highway, stimulate your nervous system, and speed up your metabolism, while the red actively triggers your appetite. The goal isn't comfort, right? They want you energized, hungry, and crucially, moving fast so they can turn over the table. Meanwhile, informational brands, like the makers of Post-it notes, utilize yellow to project mental clarity. They're deliberately trying to stimulate that analytical left brain, helping you organize your thoughts and retain info. Vincent van Gogh famously declared how wonderful yellow is. It stands for the sun. And he captured its brilliant, life-affirming essence perfectly. But as we've uncovered today, that brilliance always comes with a heavy cognitive load.
Whether it represents the life-giving warmth of a summer day or a glaring, hazardous warning sign, yellow is a color that fundamentally demands a visceral reaction from your body. It is simultaneously the color of boundless joy, sharp intellect, physical sickness, and blaring alarms. It just refuses to be ignored.
So, knowing the intense, light-reflecting biology and the deep, ancient history behind this hue, how is your nervous system going to react the next time you encounter a bright yellow object in your daily life? Will you feel that warm, optimistic serotonin boost of the sun? Or will your brain's ancient hazard detection software quietly, invisibly switch on? Pay close attention to your body the next time you step into a yellow room. The answer might completely surprise you. Thank you for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the visual world around you.